The Whiting Foundation has been around for several decades, but we have traditionally focused our support on humanities scholars and literary writers based in the United States. However, in 2016, we launched a new program of grants to support the preservation of endangered cultural heritage around the world. That's our first global program. And we focus specifically on documentary heritage or examples of the written word. Many of our grants are not in the Arab region, but we have several that are relevant to that region as defined by UNESCO. And I want to mention briefly 3 of those grants today. The first 2 of these grants, one is a grant to through the ASOR Cultural Heritage Initiatives to support a group of scholars and teachers and students at the Mosul University to set up 3 digitization stations at the university. We provided funding to train and equip those cultural heritage professionals who have been digitizing since 2018, since the liberation of the city, a range of materials, including ancient manuscripts, architectural drawings from the old city of Mosul, archaeological records from the surrounding region, rare newspapers from Mosul and related cities, and a host of other events. And my understanding is that the scanning is continuing apace. A second grant that I'm just going to mention very briefly is a grant to the Hill Museum and Manuscript Library, or HIML, which is an American organization led by Father Columbus Stewart that does works with heritage stewards around the world to preserve and specifically to digitize and back up the documentary heritage that they have in their collections. They are really world leaders in this work. If you're not familiar with them, I urge you to check them out. Their website is hmml.org, himmel.org. We're supporting some work that they do in Damascus and northwest Syria, but that's just a tiny piece of their very impressive work. I'm going to spend most of my time today on this third project, which is a program called the First Aid to Documentary Heritage Under Threat. This is a collaboration between the Whiting Foundation and the Prince Claus Fund. This program is a free grant program that we began in 2017 to provide urgent support to heritage collections that are threatened by man-made or natural disasters. I want to say very briefly something that to anticipate something that's coming. My colleague Maja Kominko of the ARCADIA Fund is going to speak after me, I believe. And she will tell you about some of the excellent and long-standing programs they have, including some work that support robust digitization of entire collections. Maya is a really important colleague and mentor for me, and as we were starting up this program, this new program in 2017, we worked very closely with her to make sure that this program articulates with the ARCADIA. So whereas those focus on digitization, as you'll hear, this program is really focused on immediate response to emergencies and largely physical conservation. But the idea is that this sets up a kind of ecosystem of support for grantees. So bear that in mind as I'm speaking and when Maya speaks as well. Here's how the program works. It's designed to support documentary heritage of any kind in countries of the world that are not rich, specifically in the regions you see highlighted here, including the Arab region, that responds to an acute threat. So that's important. It has to be heritage that is urgently threatened by a natural disaster like fire or flood, or a man-made disaster like looting or conflict. The local community, local authorities need to be involved. Usually they are leading the project, and the grants are typically in the range of about 15,000 euros. Because they're emergency response, we imagine will typically take less than a year to complete. The process is designed to be swift and responsive and relatively un-time consuming. We understand that grantees are facing emergencies and we want to help them as quickly and easily as possible. The process starts with a very short email that basically lays out the threat, the heritage, and the intervention proposed. And then we, on our end, go back and forth with the applicants to make sure the project is eligible and then to get the information we need for a full proposal. The 3 criteria we use to make funding decisions are the urgency of the threat, the soundness of the intervention, that is how good the heritage, how much helped the heritage will be by the intervention, and the significance of the heritage to the local community or a broader community. I'm going to talk about 3 specific examples in a moment, but first let me say, as I mentioned, this started in 2017, so we had a 2017 cycle and a 2018 cycle. We're in the middle of the 2019 cycle, which I'll say a bit more about. But in the first two cycles, we received 237 applications from 77 countries. In the Arab region specifically, we received 37 applications. And unfortunately, our resources are quite modest. So we were only able to fund 26 of those projects, but they are from a wide range of countries. 7 of those projects are in the Arab region in the 6 countries that you see listed here: Egypt, Libya, Palestine, Sudan, Tunisia, and Yemen. I'm going to, as I say, mention 3 of these projects in a little bit more detail. In Libya, we supported the Department of Antiquities in Benghazi to digitally document and physically move to safety more than 100 Islamic inscriptions at 9 sites around Cyrenaica, or Barca, in Libya. They worked with a university in the UK to use some very cutting-edge digital technology to do that work. In Yemen, where the Zabid Manuscript Center, obviously an ancient and very important center of learning, was threatened by termites, and we funded some work there both to fumigate the premises to eliminate the termites, but also to train the staff and improve the storage conditions to make the entire center more resilient against future threats. And the final grant I'll mention was made to a team in Benghazi that was working to conserve and begin to catalog the documents of the Great Omari Mosque Library, which, as many of you know, I'm sure is a very important collection. And I'll just flag here, this work was preliminary to full-scale digitization. It was physical conservation and cataloging. And I believe Maja will mention this project too, and sort of the next steps, the important next steps to actually make this available and safe in digital form. So the last thing I'll say is that we mean this program to be a learning experience for us. We hope to learn as much as possible about the situation of documentary heritage in many parts of the world, so that we can ultimately design a more structural, systemic intervention, regionally based, to improve communities' practice and make documentary heritage collections more resilient.
I represent ARCADIA, a private foundation established by Lisbon resident Peter Baldwin. We support cultural nature and open access. Culture still is the largest portfolio, and in culture we focus on documentation and digitization, largely because we believe that whatever else we do to protect cultural heritage, we first need to know what cultural heritage we have and what are the needs that we need to address. I will briefly talk about our 2 projects, our support to Hill Museum and Manuscript Library that Daniel has already mentioned, and our support to Palestinian Museum, and then I'm going to briefly talk about 2 our programs, the Endangered Archives Program and the Modern Endangered Archives Program. Hill Museum and Manuscript Library is an excellent organization. Daniel described it already. I don't have anything to add. They are truly wonderful and very important. What I'm going to point out here is that they digitize manuscripts, both Islamic and Christian, throughout the Middle East. And what is very important to notice that of these manuscripts, some have been already lost, which means that the digital surrogates that Hill Museum Manuscript have created are the only record of these important codices that we have. An important thing to mention about Hill Museum and Manuscript Library is that they support custodians who digitize the collections that they hold. So Hill Museum and Manuscript Library provide expertise, digital support, equipment. They also host materials online, but the digitization, whenever possible, is done by the custodians themselves. And while the manuscripts are published through the HAML, so the digital reading room created by Hill Museum and Manuscript Library, the custodians decide about the rights, so whether the manuscript can be republished. In a sense, they continue to own the digital surrogates of the manuscript. So here are some photos of collaborations in Mosul and Jerusalem, but this is the mechanism that the team is trying to use throughout the region. So we support the Palestinian Museum to create a comprehensive archive of Palestinian materials. As you know, these materials are dispersed, often in small private collections. It's very easy for them to get lost, not through any ill will or even neglect, but through the vagaries of the politics in the region, which makes this comprehensive archive really important. And you can see here some example of how diverse the materials are that they have digitized so far. I'm very glad that the Endangered Archives program that we have been supporting since 2004, that we have established and have been supporting from 2004, is represented in our hub by two panel members, Nada Idani and Laila Tusai-Mosaka. This is a program we're very proud of. It supports digitization, although it offers some support to basic stabilization of materials. It offers a whole range of grants, and I do hope that some of you will consider applying and that you will spread the word about the program. The application deadline is in November each year, so this year applications are already closed. But the program now offers rapid response grants, which accept rolling applications for the most endangered collections. So in recognition that digitization is very and often very difficult conditions, requires special preparations and special lessons learned, the program has created a number of guidelines and materials that help people who would like to support digitalization projects in the future, not only for the EEP, but in general. And I would particularly like to draw your attention to a book they have published, Remote Capture, Digitizing Documentary Heritage in Challenging Locations. This book is open access and can be downloaded from their website. So this is a sample of projects. These are specifically the projects that the EEP supported in the Arab region. As you see, there are not as many as you would like to see. The numbers are picking up in recent years, but we wanted to spread the message about this program and encourage others to apply. As you see, the materials are very diverse, ranging from periodicals and photographic collections to manuscripts. So these are two recent projects, and they show the diversity of collections. One is from Tunisia, which digitizes family-owned collections, and this is actually a phenomenal set of materials, from manuscripts to very modern materials, documenting Islamic but also Jewish culture of the region. The second project, which is very important to us, is the one that Daniel has already alluded to. We are absolutely delighted to work with Viking and Prince Carl's program. Daniel has already described it very eloquently, but we are trying to ensure that we work in partnership, that our grants build synergies and help each other, that we create a sustainable ecosystem for these projects. So this project is picking up on the project that Viking and Prince Carl's program has funded. It is going to digitize manuscripts that their grant has already stabilized. In addition to the Endangered Archives program, which is for pre-modern material, we have last year created a program for very modern materials, including born digital. These materials are, as you can imagine, very ephemeral. These might be tweets, these might be websites, this might be everything really, but also printed materials. Now, this is a bit of a tantalizing moment because they have in fact completed the first round of grant, but because the paperwork hasn't been signed yet, unfortunately I can't speak to the new grants. But there are projects in the Middle East. We're very proud that the program supported excellent projects this year.
I've put together some reflections, some recommendations, some things to consider or to keep in mind in order to increase your chances of success when applying for funding from grant-giving organizations or soliciting assistance from other philanthropic, civil society, and non-governmental organizations that support the care, management, study, and promotion of documentary heritage. Regrettably, in my experience, these points are not often shared with the applicants. Rather, they remain internal to the discussions of the funding organization. And I think this is unfortunate because it doesn't help the applicant develop professionally, nor does it help his or her institution build capacity in grant planning, grant writing, or other things such as project management or networking. Inshallah, these comments will be of some use to you, but before I proceed, I'd like to say that none of these comments should be taken to refer to any specific collection that I've worked with personally or that the Islamic Manuscript Association has been involved with. Rather, they're general remarks based on viewing many projects supported by many organizations in many countries, both in the Arab world and elsewhere in the Muslim world. Also, I've whittled my list down to 5. There were a few more. Some of those things like sustainability have been mentioned a few times. I don't feel I need to mention them again. Maybe a couple of things have already been alluded to, but I feel strongly that they remain important points to kind of hammer home, so I have left those in. The first point I would make is to know your collection, to listen to your collection, and let it show you and tell you what it needs, and base your work on these needs. We have to resist the temptation to impose on our collections politically or personally motivated projects that are not in the collection's best interests, that are not a priority for their care, their management, their study, or their promotion. In the sense it's we serve our collections, we're responsible on behalf of past generations, the current generation, and future generations. They don't serve us. It's a very important point. Number 2, demonstrate your collection's needs with documentation. Now, depending on what those needs are, there are different types of documentation that are useful. It could be an institutional or collection needs assessment. It could be a condition survey. It could be a staff skills audit. It could be a community outreach survey, or it could be some combination of these. But for example, if you have an inventory of your collection, even if it's not a full inventory, or even if it's a very cursory inventory, but it shows that parchment manuscripts are a major part of your collection. If you have some type of condition survey, which shows that those parchment manuscripts are in need of conservation, and if you've done even a simple skills audit of your staff, which shows that your conservators have no experience in parchment conservation, you've therefore amassed very good documentation that you can show to a funder to present a real need for a training course in parchment conservation. Unfortunately, the majority of applications that I've seen come with almost no supporting documentation at all. If these are the circumstances that you find yourself in, that's okay. That's how we all start. But apply for support to get that documentation. That is something that, for example, the Islamic Manuscript Association, when it did fund grant projects, was very happy to support surveys. So I think we shouldn't forget that starting at this point and amassing the evidence you need to take your collection care and management forward is a viable thing to ask for help with. The third point, and I think for me, in my experience of working on the ground in the Muslim world, where I have lived since more or less 1996, is please don't become spellbound by numbers. Make quality, not quantity, the benchmark for success of your projects. Too many projects that I see set unrealistic goals and seek to achieve them in an unrealistic timeline with, as we've seen from the report that we were presented yesterday, often insufficient material and personal resources. In these situations, in a way, you're setting yourself up to fail. And then in the struggle to try to succeed, one often cuts corners. When you cut the corners of your project, the quality decreases. And then if you divert resources from elsewhere in your institution to focus on this project to meet those numbers, you're putting other projects in the institution at risk and setting them also up to fail or to diminish in quality. And for me, as a collection care manager, heritage manager, I always feel that my responsibility is to leave the collection in better condition overall, not to create problems for the next person to come solve, but to try to solve problems, even if they're very small, one step at a time, and eventually we get to where we want to go, hopefully. I think, therefore, that thinking in small, manageable projects that one can deliver to a high level of quality is important. It doesn't always have to be a big project. You can make an equally strong impression with a small project. And consider dividing larger projects into smaller ones. Quite frequently, a large project can be divided into 3 or 4 discrete, smaller projects. I also think that funding organizations like to support success. So if you succeed in one of these smaller projects, you increase your chances or have a fairly high chance of receiving further support. The next point, to be very brief, is just a reminder to be transparent in applying for funds and reporting on projects. I don't think that much more needs to be said, but often reports are not particularly transparent. The last point I'd make is I'd encourage you to group the steps of your project, however many steps it might have, into 3 stages: a planning stage, an execution stage, and a third stage, which you might consider reflection or evaluation or planning further or applying lessons learned, something like that. Because very frequently, the planning stage and the reflection stage are absent from either the proposals that I've seen and assessed or from the grants that I've evaluated. Yesterday, Dr. Leila and Dr. Yusuf spoke about the importance, or bemoaned the lack of planning for disasters, but I have often found that there's a lack of planning in general. There's a lot of climbing up to the high dive and jumping into the swimming pool before we've looked to see if there's any water in the pool. Instead of, the planning and the reflection, I think the focus was almost exclusively on execution, where again success is typically defined quantitatively. And my fear, what I often see, is that people become trapped in this stage. If doing something is good, doing more of it is better, so keep doing, do. We never take time to stop and think about, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Do we still need to be doing it? And could it be done better? And in the worst case situation, this execution phase can become institutionalized as a way of working, by which I mean, for example, I have visited collections where conservation staff are paid based on the number of operations, let's say, treatments rather, that they carry out to an object. Now, this goes contradictory to generally our shared ethics of conservation, which is intervene as little as possible. But because that's how they receive their salary, because that's how their work is evaluated, they're encouraged to intervene more than is needed into the objects. And there's no stop in this intervention. So I think this execution phase, if we become trapped in it, it prevents us from developing, prevents us from improving, and from learning and from realizing our mission as collection care professionals.
Qatar National Library have been assigned as a back regional center to support the Heritage Library in the Arab countries plus Middle East, and have been enjoying it to other PAC centers in the world. Since 2015 till now, we have almost 4 years our efforts focused on the capacity building in the region. And as we saw yesterday in the presentation of the survey results, that one of the major challenges for the heritage libraries in the region that they need the list of needs, list of training. Most of the staff need trainings, so the capacity building is one of the major challenges for most of the culture institute in the region. And since 2015, we start focus on the capacity building. We organize several of training courses at QNL. We invite conservator and specialists from the region, from different Arabic countries. Some of them, we give them grants to come to Doha and to get this training inside the labs. Then we discover for each training we have limited number of applicants. We can offer limited numbers of grants. For some countries, we receive big numbers of applicants. For example, Al Maghreb countries and Morocco and Algeria and Tunisia. So we decided to do one training in that region. So in December, for example, in December last year, we organized one big training in Morocco, and we cooperate as an example of how we can cooperate between institutes in the region. We cooperate with archives of Morocco, and with the training there, and we invite people from Morocco, from Tunisia, from Algeria, from Egypt, from Mauritania. All of the conservators and specialists go there to Morocco, and we did this big training there. One more training we did in Muscat, in Sultanate of Oman, for the Gulf countries plus Iran. One more training will be organized soon in Lebanon in cooperation with University of Kasli. So dealing with this institute as back center, now we will get opportunities that most of Arabic libraries here. We have good numbers of culture institute now in the conference to explain more what are we doing as back center. Our overall purpose as PAC Center is capacity building. What that include, we did a translation of technical documents into Arabic. We have lists of the documents and the standard in the Arabic language. And we already translated some documents, one of them IFLA guidelines for libraries about preservation and conservation. We did series of e-learning videos in Arabic and in English, and the English it will be translated into Arabic to teach the conservator and specialists about conservation and about preservation, and some of them are advanced training about scientific analysis, about how we can study, do further studies of our manuscript, of our manual, if we have any masterpieces in the collection, how we can do further studies about it, so we can preserve it, we can conserve it, we can develop our conservation practices. And this kind of studies also support the scholars to do more studies about this collection or this object. Now we are creating a blog for all Arab conservators. It will be hosted in QNL website. It will be a blog about the news of IFLA Back Center, plus it will be like regional platform for all specialists and conservators and who work in this domain to get in touch for more dialogue, for advocacy, for more to strengthen the exchange of information, to access of information, to exchange of knowledge. This blog, we are very happy it will be in English and in Arabic. We are glad to announce now that, and it will be, the link of this blog will be reached to you through emails. Plus, we are preparing now a website also in Arabic and English about the scientific studies of the collection of manuscript and other heritage library collection, how we can do, what's the meaning of scientific studies of this collection, what machines, what equipment we use. It will be explained in an easy way. It will be a lot of examples also, except it will be explained in very easy way. What's the meaning of results, what's the meaning of curves we got. Introduce most of the equipments can be used for conservators. Some of equipment are cheap, are very easy to use, doesn't need a big training. So even no need to be with chemical engineering background or chemical background. Any conservators who study conservation, he can work on it. So that we don't speak about that. You have to hire a scientist to do this work.